The year 2387 brought humanity face to face with a truth that had governed the galaxy for 10,000 years. Captain Lee Min-ho stood on the bridge of his exploration ship, the rising Phoenix, watching something that made his blood run cold. Through the view screen, he could see the mighty Drakmari warship floating in space. The Drakmari were known throughout this sector as fierce warriors who had conquered 17 star systems. Their reptilian features and massive claws made them look like living nightmares. These creatures feared nothing and bowed to no one. At least, that's what Min-ho had thought until today. A single Zephyrian transport ship had appeared near the Drakmari vessel. It was beautiful in a strange way, made of what looked like living crystal that bent light into rainbow patterns. The ship was barely 1/10 the size of the Drakmari warship, yet something impossible was happening. "Are you recording this?" Min-ho asked his communications officer, Kim Tae-hoon. "Yes, sir, but I don't understand what we're seeing." Through their sensors, they watched as a lone Zephyrian beamed aboard the Drakmari ship. The alien was tall and graceful, its skin made of the same crystal-like material as its vessel. The moment it appeared on the Drakmari bridge, something changed. The fierce Drakmari captain, a being who had personally led charges against enemy fortresses, suddenly dropped to his knees. His massive claws, which could tear through steel, trembled. As he lowered his head to the floor, round him his entire crew did the same thing. "My eternal lords," the Drakmari captain whispered, his voice filled with worship. "How may this humble servant please you?" Lieutenant Park Ji-woo turned from her station, her face pale. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from that Zephyrian. Some kind of psychic field is covering the entire Drakmari ship. I've seen this before. 3 times in the past month, actually. First with the advanced Veltar scientists, whose technology was almost as good as humanity's own. Then with the wise Threnadi philosophers, beings known for their logical thinking. And now, the warrior Drakmari. Every single species they encountered had the same reaction when they met the Zephyrians. Complete and instant submission. Dr. Choi Soo-jin, their chief scientist, had been studying these encounters. "It's not natural," she said, joining Min-ho. At the view screen, every species we've met talks about the Zephyrian Empire like they're gods. 10,000 years of rule, and apparently not one rebellion, not one war, not even a protest. "That's impossible," said Engineer Won Jamin from his station. "In human history, we've never had a government that lasted more than a few hundred years without some kind of uprising." But the evidence was right in front of them. The Zephyrian on the Drakmari ship simply stood there, radiating some kind of invisible power. The fierce warriors around it remained on their knees, waiting for orders like faithful dogs. "Sir Taeyeon called out, his voice tight with worry. "I'm detecting 3 large ships approaching our position. They're Zephyrian." The massive vessels appeared around the rising Phoenix like crystalline mountains. Each one was at least twice the size of their ship, pulsing with that same strange energy they'd observed before. The beautiful crystal hulls seemed to sing with power. "Incoming transmission," Taehan reported. The main screen flickered. Then, filled with the image of a Zephyrian commander. This one was even taller than the diplomat they'd observed, with more complex crystal patterns covering its body. When it spoke, its voice seemed to press against their minds like a physical weight. "Unknown. Vessel, you will prepare for immediate boarding. You'll submit to the authority of the Eternal Empire as all beings must." Min-ho felt something strange happen. Pressure built behind his eyes, like the beginning of a bad headache. Round him, his crew shifted uncomfortably, some rubbing their temples. But unlike every other species they'd witnessed, none of them fell to their knees. None of them felt the overwhelming urge to worship. "This is Captain Lee Min-ho of the Earth vessel Rising Phoenix," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "We're explorers from the human colonies. Come in peace and request diplomatic contact." The Zephyrian's crystal features shifted slightly. For a moment, Min-ho thought he saw something like surprise in those alien eyes. The commander had clearly expected them to collapse in worship, just like every other species in the galaxy. "You will comply," the Zephyrian repeated, its voice carrying more force. The psychic pressure increased, making several crew members wince. "All beings submit to our will." This is the natural order. But the humans remained standing. They looked uncomfortable, maybe even scared, but they didn't bow. They didn't worship. They just looked back at the alien on their screen with curious, defiant eyes. For the first time in 10,000 years of galactic rule, the Zephyrians had encountered something they'd never seen before, species that wouldn't kneel. The commander's expression changed again, this time to something that might have been confusion or even fear. "Prepare for boarding," it said finally. "We will investigate this anomaly." As the transmission ended, Minho looked around at his crew. They were scared, but determined, ready to face whatever came next. None of them knew it yet, but they were about to become the spark that would ignite a galactic revolution. The air inside the rising Phoenix felt heavy when Admiral Kethvalar materialized on the bridge. The Zephyrian commander stood 7 feet tall, his crystalline body reflecting the ship's lights like a living prism. Every surface of his skin seemed to pulse with an inner power that made the metal walls vibrate slightly. Captain Lee Minho had seen what happened to other species when they met Zephyrians. He expected to feel an overwhelming urge to kneel, to worship this alien being like a god. Instead, he felt only a mild headache and a strange tingling sensation behind his eyes. "Welcome aboard, Admiral," Minho said, extending his hand in the traditional human greeting. "I'm Captain Lee." The Zephyrian stared at the offered hand as if it were a poisonous snake. In 10,000 years of conquest, no being had ever greeted him as an equal. They all fell to their knees within seconds, their minds crushed by his psychic power. Kethvalar focused his mental energy, sending out waves of psychic dominance that had brought entire civilizations to their knees. The invisible force filled the bridge, pressing against every human mind present. He expected to see the familiar sight of beings collapsing in worship instead. Communications officer Kim Tae-hein just rubbed his forehead and said, "Wow, that's giving me a headache. Are you okay, sir? You look like you're straining yourself." Question hit Kethvalar like a physical blow. Concern? A lesser being was showing concern for him? This had never happened before. Not once in his 1,000 years of life. Dr. Choi Soo-jin watched the interaction with scientific fascination rather than fear. She pulled out her scanner and began taking readings of the alien's energy signature. "Incredible," she murmured. "The psychic emanations are off the charts. But our neural responses are completely different from what we observed in other species." The Zephyrian admiral intensified his assault, drawing upon deeper reserves of mental power. The energy he unleashed could shatter the will of entire planets. Several human crew members winced and grabbed their chairs for support, but none of them fell down. None of them worshipped him. Engineer Wan Jamin actually looked worried about the alien. "Sir, your energy readings are spiking dangerously. Are you having some kind of medical emergency?" Kethvalar couldn't understand what was happening. His psychic power was absolute. It was a law of nature, like gravity or magnetism. Every intelligent species in the galaxy bowed before Zephyrian mental dominance. It was how the universe worked. "Your minds," he said, his telepathic voice carrying confusion and growing alarm. "What manner of creatures are you?" Lieutenant Park Ji-woo looked up from her console. "Captain, I'm reading extreme stress indicators from all 3 Zephyrian ships. Whatever they're trying to do, it's putting a huge strain on their systems." Dr. Choi stepped closer to the alien, her curiosity overcoming any sense of danger. "We're humans from the planet Earth. Your psychic abilities are certainly impressive. But I think our brains evolved differently than the other species you've encountered." She activated her portable computer and showed Kethvalar a brain scan. "Human neural pathways are incredibly chaotic. We evolved through constant adaptation. Wars, climate changes, complex social structures. Our thoughts jump around randomly, making connections that don't always make logical sense." The doctor paused, studying her readings. "I think that's why your mental control doesn't work on us. You're trying to impose order on minds that are fundamentally chaotic. It's like trying to hold water in your hands." Pilot Yoon Da-hai turned from her station. "Captain, the other Zephyrian ships are backing away. I think we're making them nervous." Kethvalar tried one more time, pouring all his psychic strength into a final assault. The effort made his crystalline body glow brighter, and several humans grabbed their heads in pain. But they remained standing. They remained free. Security Chief Bei Seung-ho actually stepped forward, looking concerned. "Hey, you need to stop. You're going to hurt yourself. You're giving my people headaches." Ooh. The words broke something inside Keth Valor's mind. A lesser being was protecting its crew from him, not bowing, not worshipping, but actually showing defiance and care. For others in his presence, it was impossible. "This cannot be," the Admiral whispered, his mental voice trembling. "All beings submit. This is the natural order. This is how it has always been." Dr. Choi looked at her scanner readings one more time. "Trying to hurt us on purpose," she said gently. "But your psychic energy is like a radio signal that our brains just can't tune into properly. We hear static instead of your commands." The realization hit Keth Valor like a tsunami. For the first time in galactic history, a species existed that couldn't be controlled. The foundation of the Zephyrian Empire, 10,000 years of absolute rule, was built on psychic dominance. If one species could resist, maybe others could too. The Admiral retreated to his ship without another word. As the Zephyrian vessels departed, their crystalline hulls pulsing with agitated energy, Minho turned to his crew. "I think we just became the most dangerous beings in the galaxy," he said quietly. "Not because we're stronger or smarter, but because we can't be controlled." Dr. Choi was already working on her computer, analyzing the encounter data. "Captain, if other species learn that resistance is possible, if they see that the Zephyrians aren't gods, ... Revolution," Minho finished. "We might have just started a galactic revolution without meaning to." None of them knew it yet, but news of this encounter was already spreading through secret channels across the galaxy. For the first time in 10 millennia, other species were hearing something impossible. There was a race that wouldn't bow. The whispers started on the mining world of Drakmari Prime, where reptilian workers had labored for centuries without question. In the deep tunnels where Zephyrian overseers rarely ventured, a strange story began to spread. There was a species, called humans, who had met the crystal gods and refused to kneel. Captain Lee Minho didn't know his ship had become the most famous vessel in the galaxy. The rising phoenix traveled from system to system, and everywhere they went, something unprecedented happened. Other beings saw humans talking to Zephyrians as equals, arguing with them, even disagreeing without falling under their control. On the scientific research station orbiting Valtar, Dr. Choi Soo-jin worked alongside alien researchers who had served the Zephyrians for generations. The Veltar were brilliant beings, their technology almost matching human achievements, but they had always limited their innovations to serve their crystal masters. During one research session, Dr. Choi was explaining human brain patterns when something remarkable happened. Scientist Velkith, who had been working on energy calculations, suddenly stopped and stared at his equations. "Why am I designing this weapon?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. "Why am I creating something? To hurt other beings? I used to study the stars because I loved learning about the universe. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Being around humans, experiencing their chaotic thought patterns and creative energy, was having an effect on other species. Is there? Minds were remembering what it felt like to think freely." Security Chief Bei Seung-ho discovered this effect more dramatically during training exercises with Drakmari warriors. The reptilian soldiers had been assigned to learn human combat techniques, though they moved like sleepwalkers, following orders without passion or creativity. During a particularly intense sparring session, Bei pushed the Drakmari fighters harder than usual. "Come on," he shouted. "Fight like you mean it. Fight like your life depends on it." Something sparked in the lead Drakmari warrior's eyes. For just a moment, the glazed look disappeared, replaced by fierce intelligence. The warrior grabbed Bei's training weapon and snarled, "We were warriors once. We conquered 17 worlds with our strength and courage. Why do we fight for beings who never hold weapons themselves?" The awakening lasted only a few minutes before the psychic conditioning reasserted itself, but it was enough. Word spread among the Drakmari forces that their ancestors had been proud warriors, not servants. Lieutenant Park Ji-woo monitored communications. across multiple systems and noticed patterns emerging. On worlds where humans had visited, productivity was dropping. Not because beings were refusing to work, but because they were asking questions. Why this task? Why now? Why always for the Zephyrians? The philosophical threnody were perhaps the most affected. These tall, peaceful beings had once been known for their deep thinking and wisdom. But after centuries of Zephyrian rule, they had become simple servants, their great minds focused only on basic tasks. When human diplomats visited their world and engaged them in actual philosophical discussions, something beautiful happened. Elder Threnody Morthok, who hadn't spoken in original thought in decades, suddenly began questioning the nature of existence itself. "If we are meant to serve," he said during a discussion with Communications Officer Kim Tae-hein, "why do we dream of freedom? Why do our hearts yearn for something more?" The question spread like wildfire through Threnody society. Within days, their entire planet was buzzing with philosophical debates that hadn't occurred for centuries. Dr. Choi made a breakthrough while studying these awakening episodes. "It's like our brain patterns are infectious," she explained to Captain Minho. "Human consciousness is so chaotic and creative that it interferes with the rigid mental control the Zephyrians impose." She had developed what she called liberation frequency generators, devices that could broadcast human brainwave patterns. If we can expose other species to these frequencies during critical moments, we might be able to temporarily disrupt Zephyrian control. The first test came when pilot Yoon Da-hai encountered a Zephyrian patrol ship that had captured a vessel full of peaceful traders. The crystal ship was preparing to relocate the traders to a labor world, as was standard procedure. Yoon activated the liberation frequency generator as she approached. The effect was immediate and startling. The trader ship's crew suddenly began fighting back against their Zephyrian captors, their minds temporarily freed from psychic control. "We're traders, not slaves," the captain shouted over the communication channel. "We have families, dreams, lives of our own." The liberation lasted only minutes, but it was enough for the traders to escape. More importantly, they carried the memory of freedom back to their home world. Engineer Won Jamin was monitoring Zephyrian communications when he picked up something that chilled him to the bone. "Captain, the Zephyrian High Council is mobilizing their war fleets. They're calling this an infection of chaos that threatens the natural order." Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Small rebellions were erupting on dozens of worlds. The Veltar scientists were secretly developing weapons instead of tools. Drakmari warriors were remembering their battle songs. Threnody philosophers were teaching concepts of freedom to anyone who would listen. The Zephyrian response was swift and brutal. Automated war machines, unused for millennia, began deploying to rebellious worlds. Energy weapons that could sterilize entire continents were being prepared. But something had changed in the galaxy. For the first time in 10,000 years, other species had seen proof that the Zephyrians were not gods. They were just powerful beings who could be resisted. Minho received an emergency message from Earth Defense Command. Massive Zephyrian fleets were moving toward human space. The Crystal Empire had decided that humanity was a virus that needed to be eliminated. Before it could spread further, the war for galactic freedom was about to begin. The massive Zephyrian war fleet emerged from hyperspace around Earth like a crystal storm. Admiral Ru Dongmin stood on the bridge of the human flagship, watching hundreds of enemy vessels appear on his screens. Each crystalline ship was beautiful and terrifying, pulsing with the same psychic energy that had controlled the galaxy for 10,000 years. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Ru," he broadcast to the hastily assembled Earth Defense Fleet. "They can't break our minds, so now they want to break our bodies. Show them why that was a mistake." Zephyrians had ruled through psychic dominance for so long that their actual military tactics had grown weak and predictable. Their ships were powerful, but they moved in rigid formations, expecting easy victories like they had achieved for millennia. Human forces scattered like a swarm of angry bees, using every trick they had learned through centuries of warfare. Admiral Ru's ships danced between the massive crystal vessels, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. But the humans weren't fighting alone, Captain. Lee Minho watched from the bridge of the Rising Phoenix as something incredible happened across the battlefield. Drakmari warriors, their minds temporarily freed by Dr. Choi's liberation frequency generators, turned their ships against their Zephyrian masters. For the honor of our ancestors, roared Commander Thakmer over the communication channel as his reptilian crew overwhelmed the Zephyrian overseers on their vessel. We remember who we were before the crystal chains. The liberation frequencies were working better than anyone had hoped. Every time a human ship activated the generators nearby, alien crews would suddenly remember their true selves. Ship after ship joined the growing rebellion as their crews, awakened from centuries of mental slavery. Veltar scientist warriors brought their advanced technology to the fight. Engineer Wan Jamin worked frantically to integrate their energy shields with human ships, creating hybrid defenses that could withstand Zephyrian weapons. "It's working, Captain," called out as enemy fire bounced harmlessly off their upgraded shields. The Veltar remember how to build weapons of war, not just tools of service. Lieutenant Park Ji-woo coordinated with awakened Threnody strategists, who provided battle plans with wisdom earned over millions of years of evolution. Their philosophical minds, freed from Zephyrian control, could see patterns and possibilities that even human military commanders missed. Security. Chief Bae Sung-ho led boarding parties that included warriors from a dozen different species. Former slaves fought alongside their human liberators, using abilities and weapons that the Zephyrians had forbidden them to remember. But the Crystal Empire had one advantage that troubled Captain Minho. Their ships were incredibly powerful, and they had thousands of years of stored resources. Even with growing rebellion, the Zephyrians could potentially win through sheer numbers and firepower. Dr. Choi.
Ow.
Sujin made another breakthrough while studying captured Zephyrian technology. Captain, their psychic network isn't just for control. It's how they coordinate their entire military. We could disrupt the network itself. We could blind their entire fleet, Minho finished. What do you need? A direct assault on their command ship, the one broadcasting the psychic network signal to all the others. Communications Officer Kim Taeon identified the target. A massive crystal palace floating in the center of the Zephyrian formation. It was 10 times larger than any other ship, protected by layers of energy shields and surrounded by hundreds of smaller vessels. "That's suicide," pilot Yoon Da-hai said, studying the tactical display. "Even with our new allies, we can't punch through that much firepower." The solution came from an unexpected source. Elder Threnody Morthok, whose people had been awakened by contact with human philosophers, contacted the Rising Phoenix with a proposal. "We know the Zephyrian language of the mind," his wise voice explained over the communication channel. "If you can get us close enough to their command ship, we can speak to them in ways they haven't heard for 10,000 years. We can remind them of what they used to be." The final assault was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships led a desperate charge toward the Zephyrian command vessel, supported by awakened fleets from dozens of species. Drakmari warriors screamed ancient battle cries while Veltar scientists fired weapons they had designed in secret. Threnody philosophers broadcast messages of wisdom and freedom on every frequency. Captain Minho's ship broke through the enemy lines just as the liberation frequencies reached their maximum power. Across the battlefield, more Zephyrian crews began to awaken from their own psychic conditioning. Some crystal ships stopped firing entirely as their crews realized what they had become. The network is failing. Dr. Choi reported as psychic static filled the area around the command ship. Their coordination is breaking down. But the Zephyrians had one final, desperate plan. If they couldn't maintain their empire, they would destroy the source of the rebellion. Long-range sensors detected massive crystal ships heading directly for Earth itself. Carrying weapons that could sterilize the entire planet, Admiral Rue's voice crackled over the communication system. "Captain Minho, we're seeing Planet Killer. Weapons moving toward Earth. The main fleet can't stop them all." Minho made a decision that would change galactic history, set course for the Zephyrian homeworld. "If we're going to end this war, we need to strike at the source of their power." The Rising Phoenix and a small fleet of liberated vessels broke away from the main battle, racing toward the Crystal Empire's capital. Behind them, the war for freedom raged across 1,000 worlds, while ahead lay the secret that had controlled the galaxy for 10 millennia. The crystal spires of the Zephyrian homeworld stretched toward the stars like frozen lightning. Captain Lee Minho led his small strike team through the alien city streets, guided by an unexpected ally. The first awakened was a Zephyrian, who had somehow broken free from his own species' psychic conditioning. His crystalline features flickered with patterns of rebellion. The truth lies beneath. The first awakened projected into their minds, his telepathic voice filled with ancient pain. What we became, what we forgot, what we lost, the Nexus holds all our sins. Dr. Choi Soo-jin's scanner readings went wild as they descended into the planet's core. Captain, I'm detecting energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. This technology is millions of years old, far older than Zephyrian civilization. Deep beneath the city, they found it. The Nexus was a massive sphere of dark metal and pulsing energy, suspended in a cavern that seemed to stretch forever. Streams of psychic power flowed from it like rivers of light, connecting to transmission towers that reached the surface and beyond, to every corner of the galaxy. Engineer 1. Jamin stared at the ancient device in amazement. This isn't Zephyrian technology. Someone else built this long before they even existed as a species. The First Awakened's mental voice carried deep shame as he shared his people's hidden history. Images flowed into their minds showing the truth that no Zephyrian remembered. Long ago, they had been slaves themselves, controlled by an ancient race that used the Nexus to dominate the galaxy. When their masters disappeared, the Zephyrians found the abandoned device and used it to free themselves. But the Nexus was a trap, the First Awakened explained. The more we used it to control others, the more it controlled us. It fed on our need for dominance, making us forget our own pain, our own slavery. We became the very monsters we once fought against. Dr. Choi studied the energy patterns flowing through the device. It's not just amplifying psychic power, it's creating a feedback loop. The more you use it to dominate others, the more addicted you become to the feeling of control. It's been turning the Zephyrians into tyrants for 10,000 years. Above them, the final battle for the galaxy raged across 1,000 worlds. Security Chief Bae Soon-jo received reports from the surface that Zephyrian forces were collapsing as their psychic network became unstable. But planet-killer weapons were still moving toward Earth. Automated systems that would complete their mission, even if their masters fell. We have to destroy this thing, Lieutenant Park, Guwal said, studying the massive device. It's the source of everything. All the slavery, all the control, all the suffering across the galaxy. But the Nexus was protected by energy shields that had withstood millions of years. Conventional weapons couldn't touch it, and the Zephyrians who built the city above had made sure no one could easily destroy their source of power. The solution came from an unexpected source. Communications Officer Kim Tae-hyun had been monitoring the psychic frequencies emanating from the device. Captain, I think I understand how this works. It's not just controlling minds, it's synchronizing them. Every Zephyrian in the galaxy is connected to this network. Dr. Choi's eyes widened as she realized what he meant. If we could broadcast human brainwave patterns directly into the network, not just locally but galaxy-wide, we could disrupt the entire system at once. Pilot Yoon Dae-hai looked at the massive energy conduits. But the power required would be enormous. We'd need to overload the system completely. The First Awakened stepped forward, his crystal body pulsing with determination. I will do it. Can interface directly with the Nexus. Channel your chaotic human patterns through the entire network. But the feedback will destroy me. There has to be another way, Minho said. But the alien's mind was already made up. My people have been slaves to this device for 10 millennia. We made the galaxy suffer because we forgot our own pain. Me remember what it means to be free, even if only for a moment. The plan was desperate, but it was their only chance. Dr. Choi connected her liberation frequency generator directly to the First Awakened's neural pathways. The alien placed his crystalline hands on the Nexus's control interface and began channeling human consciousness into the ancient device. The effect was immediate and galaxy-wide. Across space, every Zephyrian felt the chaotic, creative, uncontrollable patterns of human thought flooding their minds. The rigid psychic network that had held them in lockstep for centuries shattered like crystal struck by lightning. On a million worlds, enslaved beings suddenly remembered who they were. Zephyrian crews, their minds freed from the Nexus's influence, looked around in horror at what they had become. Many simply shut down their weapons and wept for the first time in centuries. The planet killer weapons heading for Earth went silent as their crews awakened and refused to complete their genocidal mission. Across the galaxy, the great Crystal Empire was collapsing, not through military defeat, but through the simple rediscovery of conscience. The first Awaken's body began to crack and shatter as the massive psychic feedback tore through him. But his mental voice remained strong. Thank you for showing us that gods can fall, that slaves can stand, that no one is born to kneel. As the Nexus overloaded and exploded, sending shockwaves through the planet's core, Captain Minho and his team barely escaped to the surface. Behind them, 10,000 years of galactic tyranny died in flames and broken crystal. In the aftermath, as species after species looked to humanity for leadership, Minho stood before the newly formed Galactic Assembly. "We didn't fight to become your new rulers," he declared. "We fought to prove that no one should rule anyone else." The galaxy had learned that true strength came not from forcing others to bow, but from standing together as equals.